So, are there any specific lessons learned from your UX experience that you'd like to share in addition to what we've talked about today?
First and foremost, you are not the user. Like I said, a lot of folks think that it's something you add onto the end, and they also think they're the user. They think they know what the users want. They think they know how the users think about the problem. And the reality is that as a product manager or a developer or a marketing person, you are so close to the forest you can't see the trees. You know too much about the product. You can see a screen and know what goes on the next screen. The user doesn't see that. They only see what you present to them. So there, you have to manage what you present to them. Again, managing the user experience is part of the user experience design process. So you really need to focus on that process. And when you start designing the product, focus on only those things that fit the problem. So many times, companies are just adding features because the competitors have it, and that's a feature war. Nobody ever wins that war. Rule number one, you can't lead by following.
Word for word.
Okay? So you have to take that step outside of that box, understand that you are not the user, but at the same time, the user doesn't know as much as you do either. So go out, observe the users, watch them, try to understand their task from their perspective, and then start to think about, well, gee, we have this technology that can solve that problem for them if we design it this way. So getting out there, and remember, you're not the user. One very famous client of mine followed this process, and I'll tell the story now, even though I probably was going to tell it later. The company is called ProFlowers. And what was interesting about ProFlowers is they came onto the scene in 1998. Well, in 97, they came to us and said, there are 1,200 e-florists, online florists. They're all doing the same thing. We looked at a few of them, 1-800-Flowers, FTD Florist, all that. And they all did the same thing. They were asking their users to build a bouquet. Now, that's fine for florists, but who was buying flowers online back in 97, 98? Men buying flowers for women. What do men know about flowers? Roses, baby tears. If that. Okay? And so, yeah, there were a lot of roses being sold online, but we went out and actually watched people in flower shops. We watched men mostly buying flowers, and they would stand in front of the display counter until somebody came out and said, "Can I help you?" He says, "Yeah, I need some flowers." Well, duh, that's why you're here. This is a flower shop. And then the next question is, why? Oh, I forgot my wife's birthday. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Here's a perfect I'm sorry bouquet. So we realized that people bought flowers to solve a problem. They weren't buying flowers to build bouquets. So by going out and realizing we weren't the customer and actually watching the real customers, we learned that we should organize the site around bouquets and occasions. So you click on an occasion like anniversary, and there's a set of bouquets. Of course, they're all priced differently, so you can say, which ones I wanted. And of course, what do you think the most popular occasion was besides Mother's Day and Valentine's?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah?
Yes.
That's funny.
It is, but it was true. And then we looked at what other online florists were doing too. They had shopping carts. Did you see a shopping cart when you go to the florist? No, they don't have shopping carts.
Yeah.
How do they upsell you? Do you want a vase with that?
Yes, right.
Oh, nothing says I'm sorry like a box of chocolates with those flowers.
Yeah, right.
So that's what we did. We mimicked that behavior, that experience. And consequently, ProFlowers has the highest conversion rate on the internet, 10 years running. Because it was organized around the way the user saw their problems, not the way the developers, the web designers saw the problem.
Right. So can you tell I know this example, so can you tell your experience with that particular, trying to convince the developers to go your way?
Well, that's an interesting story because when we first were engaged, they said they wanted to have the site ready for Valentine's Day in 1998. We finished the design in December, and they gave it to their development team up in Chicago. Well, about 2 weeks after Valentine's, we get a call from Pro Flowers and says, we got to have a meeting. And that didn't sound good. So they came over to the office, and they were saying, we want our money back. And we go, what? And they said, yeah, we didn't achieve any of the results we thought we would achieve. You said we'd have good conversions. We hardly had any sales.
Yeah.
Well, I pulled up the website, and it looked just like every other one. And then I pulled up our design spec, and I said, this is what we gave you, and this is what they built you. I can see the problem here. And that's when they realized that the developers had taken liberties with the design. So they called the developers up from the conference room and said, what up? And they said, well, we got the design, but nobody else was doing it that way, so we just thought we'd do it the way everybody else was because, we didn't want to, lose business. And they said, but it failed. It failed miserably. And so they turned to us with the developers on the phone and said, Larry, is there anything else you want to add to this design so we can have it ready by Mother's Day? I said, yeah, there's a few things. We finished up the design. They gave it back to the developers and told them, do not take liberties with this design. It was ready by Mother's Day. And since that Mother's Day, Pro Flowers has been the most successful e-commerce company on the internet. And it was all about designing it around the user experience. One key experience that was very interesting in the flow. When you pick the bouquet up, you set it on the counter. We saw the same behavior time and time and time again. It wasn't give the credit card.
Yeah.
It was take the little gift card and start writing a note on it. So when we did our usability testing, we had a couple of different variations of the flow, but the one that turned out the best was you pick the bouquet, you fill out the gift card, and then we'd ask, would you like a vase with that? Once a guy starts writing anything, roses are red, violets are blue, it's Nobel laureate, literature. So there was an emotional attachment, and that was part of the experience that we wanted to...
They owned it at that point.
They owned it, yes, they were emotionally invested.
Yeah.
Flowers are an emotional purchase. You have to support that emotion, and that did it.
So what can you give as far as advice on how to get folks over the fear of trying something what they consider to be novel?
Yeah, it's novel to them, but it's not novel to us UX practitioners. We've been at it for a long time. These scare tactics of what can happen if you don't follow user experience practices don't work. The only way that works is for people to get their feet wet. You can't learn to swim by sitting at the edge of the pool.
Yeah.
You have to dive in. So what we do, a lot of us offer this free evaluation. We walk through somebody's design, asking them questions like, what are your objectives? Who are the users? What are their tasks? And start to walk through the design and say, well, this doesn't really fit that task, or this doesn't fit that user profile, or where are you supporting your objective in here? It gives them a sense of, understanding of what, this is what this does for us. Because without that type of information, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. And they're always going to rely on their tired old processes, regardless of how ineffective or unsuccessful they might be. Because nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM.
Yeah.
If you keep making the same mistakes everybody else got made, they can't fire everybody. So we give them a reason to start thinking outside the box. Give them a free evaluation. Let them understand this is the type of information we get. And everybody realizes, wow, this is a completely different way of thinking. It doesn't necessarily change what they do. It just adds something to the mix to say, we need to consider this now. I understand what this means to me now.
Great. Anything else that you want to add?
Well, user experience design has been evolving for about 20 years now. It started off with Dr. Don Norman, and a bunch of others, but he wrote the seminal work. It's called Design of Everyday Things. And it talks about how simple things can affect your life. I mean, how many times have you been walking out of a building, you get to a door, you reach out, you grab that handle, and it doesn't open. And then you see a little sign above the handle that says,
Push.
You've been to that door. No amount of signage is going to change the fact that your intuitions and expectations are so strong that when you see a handle, you're going to pull on it.
Yeah.
Well, if you put the right control on there, the right affordance, you put a flat panel on there, you don't need any instructions. Think of it. If something as simple as a door requires instructions, there's something inherently wrong with that design. Put a flat panel on there, all you can do is push on a panel.
Yeah.
Well, that's where user experience started with Don Norman in that book. Since then we've evolved, and now we're going into the stage where we're seeing an opportunity to create knowledge in products. So again, getting back to that best practices approach, if you see 100 different people doing things 100 different ways, the old approach would be make it so anybody could do it any way they wanted. The new approach is, why is everybody doing it so differently? What is one way or two ways that we can get people to do it? How can we optimize the design of the product so that it guides people, not force, guides people down this path so that everybody does it right from that level on? Well, if you have a product that can do anything any way you want, the success of the product is highly dependent on the individual skills of each user.
Sure.
So you might have somebody that's tech savvy, and so they're going to be successful. Somebody's tech phobic, they're not going to be successful. So the level of success is going to vary, depending on each user.
Sure.
Is that the experience you want to, put out there?
Right.
So by optimizing it so that there's a best practices, you have a baseline level that's higher than the average, so that nobody is going to fail any lower than this base level, and people will be guided to learn and succeed above that. That's knowledge design, and so that's the direction the user experience is going. And what that does is that moves user experience design farther up the food chain, if you will, in product design. So it used to be that user experience folks were brought in at the development level. And now we're being brought in more and more at the marketing level because it's part of a marketing effort. The idea is that if you have an objective and you can design for it up front, then all of your other aspects of your product development, launch and everything go hand in hand. What message do you want to generate? What position do you, if you have a product that the user experience is supposed to be luxury, are you going to position it at Walmart?
Sure.
It's just not going to fit. People are going to question that relationship there. So if you start earlier on and you do your market research and you do your user research, you can incorporate all of that knowledge before you start developing the product. Because oftentimes, once you start developing a product, it's too late to change it. Once that ship is moving, it doesn't turn very fast.
Yeah, right.
And here's the thing. If you don't incorporate user experience, eventually your competitors will. And so far, the biggest companies that are succeeding out there have user experience teams in their corporations. You look at Apple, you look at Xerox started off with Don Norman and other folks like that inputting information. Look what happened to them. I mean, well, now lately they've, strayed from that objective, but back then they were the epitome of good design. Same with Hewlett Packard, a number of companies. Well, lately, websites, web companies are starting to follow. Google has a huge UX team, and they're responsible for things like the mapping, the agent software, all of that. So if you're not doing it, your competitors will, and so far the companies that have user experience teams are the ones that are dominating their markets. So the next level is incorporating knowledge into the product. That's where the next level of design success will be.
All right. Well, Larry, thank you for sharing with us your UX experience today. I know I've learned quite a bit, especially as a product manager, and how to use that UX lens in my product management process. So thank you very much.
Thank you.